It's the Ugly American Werewolf in London rock podcast with your hosts, the Wolf and Action Jackson, who are keeping rock alive by talking classic rock, hard rock, progressive rock, heavy metal, 80s music, early MTV, UK vs. US chart success, and much more. This is the home of classic album and live concert reviews, and your place for interviews with artists and legends. You're rocking with the Wolf. Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to episode number 216 of the Ugly American Werewolf in London rock podcast. Brought to you by me, your host, Mac B. the Wolf, and I will be joined, as always, by my partner in crime from the East Coast of the United States of America, Mr. Gary Action Jackson. And we want to thank everybody for tuning in last week to our show on Van Halen's Balance, as it was turning 30. Not a super popular one, not anybody's favorite, I don't think, in the Van Halen catalog, not even amongst the Sammy years. But it's a Van Halen album, it was having a big milestone, and we weren't super familiar with it because at that point Van Halen was going through a lot of things, and, well, they weren't quite the same Van Halen that they used to be. So we thought that because we didn't know it very well, we'd take the opportunity to dig in. You'll have to see what we said about that one on episode number 215. But this week, we are going after one that should be familiar to most of you, but isn't really well known, as we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of the debut album by The Firm, the supergroup, the headline of Paul Rodgers of Bad Company and Free fame, and Jimmy Page, of course, of Led Zeppelin fame, on guitar, with the veteran legend Chris Slade on the drums, who was a guest of ours on episode number 91, and Tony Franklin, the Fretless Monster, when he was really just a kid, still only about 22 years old when they made this record. You probably know the radio hit Radioactive, which did chart in America, did pretty well, was on MTV, but didn't do that well in England. Now, everybody was really psyched up and had high anticipation over the fact that Jimmy Page was back. And not only is he back, he's in a band with Paul Rodgers, the incredible voice behind all those Free and Bad Company hits, who was on the Swan Song label under Led Zeppelin. Now, at the time, Jax and I were young. We're like 11, 12 years old. So we don't really have an appreciation of who Led Zeppelin or even Bad Company are, who Paul Rodgers or Jimmy Page are. We just know that this song, Radioactive, that's on the radio and MTV, is a hit, and we like it. There's something about it that's different. It's got some cool guitar in it. It's got some killer fretless bass in it. Again, didn't really know what that was. And it's a short, catchy pop song. But we were still a few years away from really getting into our Led Zeppelin phase and really understanding who they are, which would, of course, shape our understanding and appreciation of rock music forever. And it was later that we realized, oh my God, that was Jimmy Page on Radioactive. That was Jimmy Page in that band, The Firm. So going back and listening to this music and finding it and learning to appreciate it was just a journey that we had to go down. And because we talked to Chris Slade, the legendary drummer, who's probably most famous for being in AC/DC during the Thunderstruck days, talk about being on the road with Jimmy and Paul, and it just re-sparked our interest. So we saw that the album was turning 40. We thought it would be fun to go track by track, because this is not one well known by everybody. Even if you know the big hit, you probably don't know the whole album. And while not everything is amazing on it, it's the return of Jimmy Page, so it's worth doing a show on. Now, before we get too into it here, do have a little bit of business to take care of. As always, we like to mention we are proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network, a family of over 100 different shows. You can learn more at pantheonpodcast.com or on socials at PantheonPods. And we love giving shout outs to our sponsor, rarevinyl.com, who's based in the UK, folks, but they ship all around the world. And they also procure collections from all around the world as well. So if you're looking for Japanese singles or picture discs or box sets or first prints in mint condition, they've got it all in their catalog of over 250,000 items. They got a great team there. If they say it's in condition, it's in that condition, and they will ship it to you in that condition. I know they have a little Firm stuff, but they got a lot of Zeppelin stuff. I know there are a lot of Zeppelin collectors out there. They've got it in great condition. They've got rare stuff. They've got stuff from all around the world. So go to rarevinyl.com, find some stuff you love, and then use the code UGLY to save 10% off one entire order. Not just one item, but one entire order. So you find 10 odd things that you are looking for, some really old classic albums that you've always wanted in great condition, buy them all. And even if it costs you $1,000, you're going to get $100 off with the code UGLY. So visit Rare Vinyl, use the code UGLY to save 10%. Your record collection will thank you. Now back to the firm. As huge worshipers at the altar of Jimmy Page, we felt we had to discuss this album at some point because it's an interesting point in his career. He was kind of done. He was not in great shape during the In Through the Outdoor days. You could see him in the Arms concerts that he did to help benefit Ronnie Lane and MS. He was not in good shape at all. He'd done a little soundtrack for Death Wish 2. He had worked with Roy Harper on his album, Whatever Happened to Jugula. And that's kind of where he met Tony Franklin, as Tony had been working with Roy Harper. But not many people know it. Not many people are super familiar with this album. It didn't sell that well. It was a gold album. They did a successful arena tour in the United States around it. But it's kind of blip on the radar between Led Zeppelin related stuff for Jimmy. And because the band is so talented, and there's some highlights in here, we wanted to go ahead and do it for you. So here we go. As it's turning 40, we're going track by track on the debut album by the firm, here on The Wolf. Let's jump into this special album from early 1985 because, I don't know, I feel like it's a big deal. It's a huge album for Zeppelin fans and the like. But it didn't make an enormous impact, nor did we at the time, when we're like 12 years old, really understand who Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers were.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that while going through the notes on this. Like, yeah, why wasn't this a bigger deal for me? I think we were just a little bit too young. You maybe had heard of Led Zeppelin before. You knew, oh, this was one of the guys from it, but it didn't. I didn't anticipate it like I would have probably if we were maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 years older.
Right.
In 1985.
Right. Yeah. No, it was 2 to maybe 3 years too early for us as far as our Led Zeppelin discovery, which is funny because in 1988 when Outrider came out, that was huge as far as anticipation goes.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, whoa, Jimmy Page is making an album, really his first solo album. He did do some soundtrack work, which we're going to talk about a little bit here. But that was his first Jimmy Page solo album, was Outrider. And yeah, we were freshmen in 1987 in high school, and that's when I really got into Led Zeppelin in earnest.
Correct. And same boat. And in Bad Company too. Like I didn't.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
it was definitely more of a big deal to me in '85 because it was one of the guys from Zeppelin, and then Bad Company. I'm like, well, okay, I don't really know that, but that's fine. He's got a good voice.
That's all I
knew. Yeah, that's all I knew at that point in time. I didn't have any idea about Bad Company until I got to high school.
Yeah, and so, it comes in, and we'll circle back for them in a second. It comes in, Radioactive is on the radio. It is on MTV. I'm like, hey, that's a cool double neck guitar that guy's got. I kind of dug the song, but I had no understanding of who this band were and why this was important and all that kind of stuff. Now, to go back in time, yes, Jimmy Page was in rough shape at the beginning of the 80s. But Paul Rodgers was also kind of extricating himself. See, the death of the death of John Bonham ended Led Zeppelin.
Right.
As our friend Mick Wall, who came on the show to tell us, that wasn't the reason, the real reason. The real reason is Zeppelin was spent. They were just, they had done too much damage themselves. It was too big a business. They all kind of needed out. John Bonham's death was the excuse to move on. I feel like it was especially the excuse to move on for Robert Plant, because before he started his solo career, he did take time off and was kind of tinkering with the idea of getting a straight job. I mean, working in the music business, but not being in a band anymore, right?
Yeah.
Really, it was the end for Peter Grant.
Right. Yeah. I think it sounds to me like he really had a kind of a special relationship with Bonham, and his death really hit him hard. And he just said, yeah, I'm done with this whole thing. And that would include the Zeppelin other enterprises they had.
The business of Swan Song, which included Bad Company.
Right.
And there were only a few different artists on Swan Song, like Detective, who didn't last that long with Michael DeBar. But Bad Company was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And they sold albums very well, and they toured very well. And to hear Simon Kirk from Free and then Bad Company tell it, it's like, we were so well taken care of. Because of Peter Grant, we made a lot of money. We had great gigs. Nobody messed with us.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing really well. And then they tried to kind of continue. I think Desolation Angels was their last album.
Yeah, with Rodgers.
With
yeah.
Paul Rodgers. And then he's like, you know what? And that's 82, I think it was. And then they kind of fall apart too. Like, okay, yeah, we can't do this anymore. So they stop, and then Rodgers makes a solo album, which doesn't really go anywhere. It's not bad, but it's not great. Meanwhile, Jimmy gets kind of lost. He was still kind of in his needle days at the end of Led Zeppelin. If you look at the Nebworth shows, he is so skinny. He can barely hold up the single neck guitar, let alone the double neck, man. That thing's bigger than he is at that point.
Yeah, there's a note in here that apparently Rodgers, it was starting to see him see Page like his friend Paul Kossoff from Free, that just went down this dark hole and never came back.
That's right.
And so I think this was kind of like, hey, let's do something that will take your mind off drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. So, and the dissolution of this enormous band that you had been in charge of basically since the beginning.
Yeah, because wasn't there at that time in the 80s, that was all kind of like pushed aside, like all those big bands from the 70s, like You're Over, Go Away. There was that period before they had the big comeback in the late 80s where it was like, no, that's old. We don't like that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to punk in the late 70s and then the new wave and the techno and all that kind of stuff did in the 80s, plus MTV comes out. And Jimmy is seen talking in interviews about, like, I'm not an instant actor. I don't really know what to do with these videos.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute because, yeah.
He never wanted to do any of that stuff. And then all of a sudden, well, look, if you're going to be a rock star in 1985, you have to have these. So Jimmy kind of went into his own. We went to his house in England, which was right next to the house. Now it's Robbie Williams' house. But back then it was Michael Winner's house, who was a director and a producer. He did Death Wish. He did a bunch of other films that were less successful throughout the end of the 70s, so he kind of needed a new hit. Was going to do it for Canon, which is Golan Globus, and Who Brought You Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo. And he's like, I need you to do a soundtrack for me. I just kind of went next door, Jimmy, I need you to do this. So he screened it for him, and Jimmy said, fine, I'll do it, but I don't want you bothering me. I don't want you looking over my shoulder. I'll go into my studio, The Soul, and I will do this, and I will crank it out for you. And so he did that. And Winner's like, it's the best piece of soundtrack, ever. Like, I don't know about that. But at least he was doing something besides just going into his inner self. Plus, they both did the Arms concert, which was kind of a benefit for MS, but was basically for Ronnie Lane of the Faces. And they did, they recorded one, which was great, but they did a tour and they went to America and did a tour of it. And that's when Jimmy kind of started to say, hey, Paul, because I think that was like 1982 and 83. And it was also pretty amazing because Eric Clapton did it, Jeff Beck did it, and Jimmy Page did it. So getting the three of them on stage for a while it's something people really wanted, like these three legends who had been with the Yardbirds.
But never together, though.
And it's like, okay, now look at all these studs. They're all in one place. Plus it had, other great people as well. And Paul's like, I used to just kind of bump into Jimmy in the office, in the Swan Song offices throughout the 70s when we were kind of both in London or whatever. But now Jimmy's like, why don't we do something? Why don't we put something together? And Paul's like, I don't know, Jimmy. I just got out of this thing with Bad Company and I'm kind of monkeying with going solo or, trying to figure out what I do next. And then the legend now is that Jimmy says to Paul right then and there, hey, we won't do this forever. We'll just do like 2 albums and 2 tours and that's it. To try to get Paul on board. He's like, hey, we don't need to get, to do this next supergroup or whatever. But yeah, we should go out and do this because Jimmy was coming around to his house and writing music and they were playing together. It's like, well, maybe we'll do something. I don't know. And Jimmy's trying to convince him to do it. And then he kind of floats this 2 albums, 2 tours, that's it idea to him. You go talk to Chris Slade about this many years later. You can go to Ultimate Classic Rock. This is something he said maybe 2.5 years ago. Now it's in 2022. He's like, if it was only supposed to last 2 albums, I certainly didn't know about it. Maybe Tony did. But I didn't know anything about it. I really thought we were growing. I thought we had a chance to grow and get big. To him, it was, well, by the time you got to 86 and into 87, people were starting to say, hey, you could put Zeppelin back together again. And Jason's getting old enough to the point where he could do it. Now, Jimmy did work with Roy Harper on his album, Whatever Happened to Jugula, or Jugula, which, is a haunting, strange, weird album, especially from Jimmy's perspective. But he had this 19, 20-year-old bass player named Tony Franklin on it. And Jimmy got to know him in recording this album. And of course, then he plucked him like, hey, I want to go make a new band. I'm going to take you with me. And so Tony's like, yeah, because, I love Roy. He's giving me this chance or whatever. But
however,
people in America who don't know who Roy Harper is, and you're not alone, he's best known in America for singing Have a Cigar for Pink Floyd. Everyone's like, oh, that's Roger, right? No, it's Roy. They tried it 30 times, both with Roger and David Gilmour, and it just wasn't right. And they said, fine, Roy, you do it. And he did it and okay, yeah, that's it. That's it. We'll put that on the album. And so, yes, it's on Wish You Were Here. But yeah, Jimmy had done that with him. Then he's like, okay, now I'll do something else. So Jimmy wasn't doing nothing. I mean, between doing the Death Wish thing, the Arms tour, working with Roy, he had to put Coda together, right, for 1982 release.
Right.
After John Bonham died. By the way, on Ultimate Classic Rock, they said that Coda was better than In Through the Outdoor, that In Through the Outdoor was the worst Led Zeppelin album, and I take issue with that. I know it's not classic blues hard riffs like the second album, which I'm sick to death of, but I think it's way better than their last album.
I always thought Coda was, it's not bad, but it was just an afterthought. Here's some stuff that we didn't use. So
right, it's a mishmash. It's stuff that wasn't all finished or was from different eras. Really over 10 years. But anyway, that's the story for another day. So, we're trying, but you look at Jimmy at the Arms concerts, he looks bad. He's too thin. He's still playing pretty cool stuff, but it is sloppy. And people are like, we don't know if Pagey's going to come out of this.
Yeah. And I remember seeing that the first 2 seconds of Death Wish 2. I don't know why. It was on, cable or whatever. And Death Wish 2. Why would they even make this movie? Soundtrack by Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
That can't be the same. Why would he even do this? So now the story makes sense. It was a favor, but still just very odd.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And some of them made sense in the course of the movie. It's background music,
Yeah.
It's music composed and played by Jimmy Page. It's not sung by Jimmy Page or by anybody else for that matter, really. Yeah, it's odd. So it's okay, Jimmy wants to get back into a band again. That was on the Swan Song label, the Death Wish. But this is Jimmy just going to Atlantic. Atlantic's being because, Swan Song, they put out the last Led Zeppelin album. They put out that Jimmy Page, quote unquote, solo album soundtrack. And then that's the end of Swan Song, basically. No more Bad Company, no more Zeppelin. That's it.
I kind of get the feeling that was somebody's idea. Wouldn't it be cool to have our own record label? Well, yeah, it would be cool. How much time and effort is it going to take to run this thing? Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. I don't think it was fine. Yeah, I think it was a giant pain in the ass. I think it was just something that it was way more work than anybody wanted to put into it.
Well, but it did get them those amazing covers because Peter Grant's you're going to pay for all of that. Zeppelin doesn't pay for that. Atlantic, you pay for all that stuff. So they come up with Zeppelin 3 with the thing that spins, and they put them up with physical graffiti that has the windows and all that kind of stuff. Comes up with In Through the Outdoor, which had, I don't know, was it 4 different covers? Was it 12? Yeah. You don't know because it's in a paper bag that you then open and you see which cover you got. So that's them just flaunting their power now that Led Zeppelin's over. Yeah, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah. We're not paying for this silliness.
But Atlantic's hey, album by Paul Rodgers and Jimmy Page? Yeah, give us some of that. We'll take that. You can come do that. We'll help you make videos. And Jimmy's videos? But and then of course, famously, what was on Ugly American Werewolf in London, episode 91, Chris Slade talked about the day in 1984 that he got 2 phone calls. The first from David Gilmour asking him to come out on a tour with him. And the second from Jimmy Page saying, I'm going to make this band, Paul Rodgers, and we want you to be in it. And he said, I'm sorry, Jimmy. I want to do it, but David just rang me up to be in his. And Jimmy's yeah, no problem. I'm filthy rich. I don't have to do this right away. You finish that up, and then we'll come do this. And that's the way the firm was put together, with, God, one of the best rhythm sections in the history of mankind.
So it begs the question, was this a supergroup? Because not everybody in the band came from a successful act that they had started, which that's kind of the recipe for it. But I think if you've got somebody who Jimmy Page will wait for to an entire tour with David Gilmour, and then you've got Tony Franklin, who I think he was only like 22 or 23 when they made this record, who's gone on to do amazing session work and work with everybody in the universe. If you've got these two guys that you handpicked to bring in on the rhythm section, yeah, this is a super group. You can't.
Yeah.
There's no denying it.
No, Paul Rodgers and Jimmy Page alone make it a supergroup. They just do. Page's star power on its own makes it a supergroup. Plus, you put in this amazing voice of Paul Rodgers, and yeah, it's for sure a supergroup. Now, and then Chris Slade has been with all these other great bands, so he counts. Tony's a little bit of an unknown, but
he makes himself known on this record.
Yeah, he's so good. Yes, he's like 22 when they start recording this stuff, and by the time it comes out, he's still only 22 years old. Yeah, but his talent is unreal, and to me, he is the standout on this record.
Agreed.
If you go in this record think, okay, this is Jimmy Page, Jimmy's back, there's not a lot of moments where like, oh, that is such amazing Page, I'm so glad we got this. Or even for Paul Rodgers, whose vocals are solid throughout the whole thing, it's not like, oh man, you're going to forget about Bad Company after you hear this record.
Right.
He's not bad or anything.
No. I mean, it's very passable. He does a good job with the material he's got, but you're right, that bass just doing its own funky little thing on pretty much every track. Not really overpowering, but putting it in there where it's giving it just something extra, something different. I don't think he ever overpowers anybody, but it's just enough where it's not following along. It gives it its own flavor on this record.
And you need to put flavor in when Jimmy's taking a break or he's waiting to put something in, because that's the thing. Jimmy kind of does that just-in-time stuff. He's like, ooh, we need a flare here or something like that. Yeah. Well, you need something in between the flares to kind of keep the story going, and I think Tony Franklin is off the charts good on this. Not to mention, he adds the keyboards and the backing vocals. I mean, he's really kind of the MVP. And, he tells a story about how he laid down a guitar part for the album. And it's not like Jimmy said, hey, okay, thanks for laying the basic track. Now I'm Jimmy Page and I'll come in and put it down. He's like, no, you did it right. That's fine. We'll leave it on there, kind of thing, which is kind of cool to hear that Jimmy wasn't overbearing. Look, kid, I'm Jimmy Page and you're not.
Go sit in the corner.
Yeah,
now.
the guitar will be me. Yeah, it won't be you.
It definitely sounded like that was his vibe on this record. Of like if you have something, like I think Rodgers had a couple things too that he wrote that he was like, yeah, no, that fits the song. Cool, moving on.
And we are remiss not to mention that there was also in the early 80s, I'm going to say 1981 or so there, a band called XYZ, like X Yes Zeppelin, which was Jimmy and Chris Squire and Alan White of Yes. Like, X Yes and X Zeppelin, because after the drama tour, Yes basically broke up. So they were noodling around, and I think Pino Palladino was maybe going to be on the bass.
Could have been. And they wanted him for this project in some capacity, right? Or in some moment in time they thought about him.
Right. But, so they're trying to put this together, but they're both, under contract with either other acts or other record companies. And so it was just kind of too hard to kind of put together. They say that out there somewhere there is some XYZ stuff, and some of the stuff that they worked on in those sessions eventually ended up some on Yes albums, some on these Firm albums, or even Outrider, I think maybe. But, it never officially went anywhere. But maybe that stuff's out there somewhere that we could see it make the light of day. I don't know. I don't know who has it. I would assume Jimmy, but I could be wrong about that. And now that Chris and Alan are gone, I don't know if that makes it easier or complicates it more.
Yeah, I don't know. When it comes down to record company contracts, who knows?
So anyway, all right. So that's the kind of story leading up. Now, what's interesting is this album came out on February 11th, 1985. However, they did a small tour at the end of 1984 through like Europe. Just a few dates: Stockholm, Copenhagen, Lund, Frankfurt, Hamburg, and then Middlesbrough Town Hall, England, and a couple nights at Hammersmith. This is November and December, maybe 2 weeks at the end of 1984.
Okay.
And they refuse, basically, to play any Bad Company or Led Zeppelin stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a little White Summer in there from the Yardbirds days, but or maybe you'd hear a little bit of Kashmir before it goes into something else. They basically played the whole album, which wasn't out yet, and then stuff from Paul's solo records and stuff from the Death Wish 2 soundtrack, which everybody was clamoring for. But they said they did 2 hours just about, with no Zeppelin, no Bad Company.
I can't imagine that went over all that well because you think the two of them together, okay, they've got new stuff, but they'll throw in a little bit, a couple of the hits, right? Nope. Good night, folks.
Now, of course, they say it was received very well, but that's because people were like anxious to see anything Page had done, I mean, that's just the way that works. It was like, yeah, Jimmy's doing it. Oh, you think you do Zeppelin? He has to, because there's no internet, there's no trade papers to say this is exactly what's going to be. You just kind of go on faith. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah, I mean, then when they did their tour of America, the album was out. Yeah, I mean, they basically start February 28th, but they played arenas. They played arenas all across America just based on the fact that it was Paul Rodgers from Bad Company and Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. Never underestimate the power and the popularity of Led Zeppelin in America. It is overwhelming. And so, yeah, for 2.5 months or whatever, they did a little over 30 dates. They did go back to play a couple dates in England at the end. Wembley Arena, Edinburgh Playhouse, Scotland, NEC Birmingham. That's it, because they're a bigger deal in America than they were in England and Europe. But anyway, it's not crazy for people to do a tour without an album out. Usually it's because there were some kind of delays and they were trying to, to get it out, and for whatever reason it didn't. But yeah, they did that tour, a little bit in like Scandinavia and then a couple in England before the album ever came, before anybody had heard any of the songs. It's just shocking to me that it worked.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to, I know it was a long time ago, but interested to hear somebody's reaction to that, because yeah, you're sitting there listening to songs you've never heard of before, waiting for songs that you want to hear that are never going to come. How did that go over? Well, we were a little disappointed. I can imagine you were. Here's another one you haven't heard.
That's right.
Okay. Who wants to hear something off the Death Wish soundtrack? No one. Okay. Hey, you say, there was one thing I was going to ask. You sent me that deal where they had the 5 from 5 from the Firm?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was cool to see the old MTV bumpers and everything. But in 1985, 86, who else was playing videos?
Well, I mean, they had stuff like Friday Night Videos and stuff like that, I think.
Okay, because
they didn't have a dedicated channel.
It seemed like they made a big deal out of this is an MTV exclusive.
Well,
okay.
But it means you're not showing it anyplace else, I guess.
One other place they sold.
Well, they can put it on
get this on Much Music.
I guess not. Yeah. All right.
It was cool to see all that old stuff, though.
No, it was. I agree, but that was kind of for the next album.
Hi guys, this is Chris Slade, drummer of AC/DC and many others, and you're listening to the ugly, I mean really ugly, Werewolf in London.
All right, so we're going to go through this here track by track. The Firm, produced by, believe it or not, Jimmy Page. Just like every Led Zeppelin album was. Soul Studios, Cookham, Berkshire, England. Mixed at Soul, which is Jimmy's thing, and the Townhouse, mastered at the Townhouse on Atlantic, just over 40 minutes. And the first song, Closer, comes out. Want to kind of come out and make a statement. What do you think about Closer as the way to kick this one off?
Well, it's upbeat. It's high energy.
Yep.
It does have, listening to it now, it does have a very 80s feel to it. Like if you'd never heard this before, when did this come? Mid-80s? You're correct. The lyrics are, I mean, it's nice to hear Paul's voice, but the lyrics are a little on the weak side. But you've already got that funky bass. You already know something's going on with the bass part here. And then the horns lock in the 80s flavor.
The horns make it kind of interesting. Yeah. There's There's horns on here on Closer. Yeah, they've got a Steve Dawson, Paul Schultz-Weimar, Willie Garnett, Don Weller. They all play horns to kind of give it a little bit of kick. It's not a bad song to kick off the album. It's kind of funky. Jimmy is a little off on this one. It's not really a Jimmy vehicle. Tony is cool as hell on this. The bass is fantastic on this, but it's kind of short, under 3 minutes, and there's no real guitar solo. It's like, is Jimmy even on this track? I mean, I know he is, but it's not like you hear that, oh, Jimmy Page is back.
Yeah,
like that's not what happened here.
It's a little disappointing. I like it because it's an upbeat number to start the album, so that'll work. But you're right. I mean, it could have been anybody playing guitar on this one.
Right. It's not like, oh, wow, it's Jimmy Page. Nah, it's just, it's a little guitar.
Flames are getting higher and higher. You got my senses reeling. Come on closer. When you hold me tight, feel my body slipping under. The lightning strikes, hits me and I feel the thunder.
It was the second single off the album, and it didn't go anywhere. It didn't seem to really chart anywhere, and there was no video for it. However, if you watch a live concert, and they did, and I think this was in like 1986, like kind of broadcast a live it probably wasn't broadcast, probably filmed and then shown on MTV later. But they did broadcast a live concert by the firm that I think was on the Mean Business tour, and Closer was good on there. It was a good live song, but it's you're looking for like Jimmy Page is back, Paul Rodgers is back, and it's all right. The horns are kind of weird, but you know.
I've got a note here. Solo is okay, but beneath Page. Like, hey, I played on that. Did you? Okay.
I'd say there was no solo, but that was me. That's just me. But then you go to Make or Break. And I put this as mid-tempo, and a lot of these are what I would call mid-tempo or even slow. Closer is not. Closer's got a good groove to it. But this is kind of a mid-tempo. It's a little spare with just Jimmy and Paul to start. And there's a little slide from Jimmy. And so, yeah, I do kind of like this one.
This is not a bad track. But if you look at the credits on this deal, it's credited only to Rodgers as a write. This definitely sounds like a Bad Company song more than a collaboration. It kind of sounds a little bit like Rocksteady at the beginning. It does as it moves on. It gets more into like the Zeppelin feel kind of at the end, but at the beginning this could have been a Bad Company song.
A Bad Company, yeah. And it's a song about needing some side action, basically. I mean, it's like, we're going to make up or break up. And look, you just need to give me a little freedom. Like, we're together, but, come on, I'm Paul Rodgers. What do you want me to be faithful on the road? Come on,
Got me so I can't tell my right from my wrong. It hurts me and I know you're hurting. Got me so I don't know if I'm coming or going. The one thing I know that it's for certain. You gotta make your mind up.
Just give me a little freedom. Jimmy gives a little flourish here and there that is very Jimmy.
Yeah.
But it's a slowdown in there. It's not a speed up. It's not like, hey, Jimmy's coming. Here we go. No, it kind of slows it down.
This would not have been my choice for the first track. This would have definitely given the whole album a different feel had you picked this one to go first.
No, you got to have something faster. And I think Closer is a decent, it is louder with bigger chords at the end. So that kind of makes it a little more Zeppelin-esque, if you will.
To me it picks up at the end when it goes into that part. I'm like, oh, okay, now I feel the Page influence
exactly
in the song.
Yeah. So not a bad song. Not off the charts awesome, but not bad. You move into Someone to Love, and honestly, you listen to it at the very first, it sounds like it's Radioactive.
Yeah, the drum beat is very similar.
And then it's not. But this song is a little Zeppelin-like, and Tony's bass on here is awesome. I mean, thanks to Chris and Tony, this is funky. But Jimmy's just kind of along for the ride. That's what I say.
Yeah, and there were a couple of interviews, but they were a little bit later. I think they were for that second record. I was really kind of trying to gauge where he was health wise and stamina wise when they made this record, because your mind thinks, okay, yeah, no problem. We'll get back in here, we'll do this. I really wonder if, he got into the studio and was like, oof, it's like running a marathon when you haven't done anything for a while. And maybe you just kind of need to sit back because, yeah, it does feel like he kind of put a little bit of touch on this, but it's not like he really dug in.
Yeah, I mean, there's a solo on here, but it's really kind of noodling.
Yeah.
For a while, but before it really goes anywhere. And Jimmy said something interesting in that 5 for 5. And for our listeners, what Jackson's talking about is MTV had a thing when they did their second album, Mean Business. They did 3 videos that apparently were a series. The guy was talking about, I'm like, these don't have anything to do with each other. Dude.
I was having a hard time with that. I'm like,
there's no line between them. You're full of it. But, they had 2 from the first album. Now they had 3 from the new one, and they could do world premiere videos. Mm-hmm. But J.J. Jackson is kind of describing the firm. And so they would show the videos, and then in between they would have interviews, mostly with Page and Rodgers. But they let Chris Slade and Tony, in there for a little while. And Jimmy's talking about how filming videos is hard because every time the solo is different, because he admits he forgot what he was supposed to play. So it's different every time. And yeah, he noodles on this for a bit before it really goes anywhere. Mm-hmm. There's a stop, and then Jimmy brings it back. It's still not, it's Zeppelin-like, but it doesn't have the quality or the bombast of a Zeppelin song.
Yeah, and it correct. And the lyrics kind of just follow the beat. And after a while, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done with this one.
Yeah, I mean, again, Tony's bass, killer. Mm-hmm. And the song's fine. I don't dislike it. But, again, it's kind of like this is what you do after Led Zeppelin.
Right. You're expecting so much more from this. And maybe that's kind of the
problem.
Yeah, kind of the grade for the whole record. But, yeah.
All right. Next song, Together. Mm-hmm. All right. It's acoustic. Little
right. Changing it up.
But the vocal phrasing, I feel like, not the words themselves, but the way the vocals play along against the music is just a little weird. It's kind of weird throughout a lot of spots of the album, but I feel like it really stands out here. Like it doesn't match what's going on underneath it, kind of thing.
Okay, I'll give you that. And the other thing I was thinking was a couple of them is like it's shoehorned in. Like you make the word, you extend it for an extra syllable. And it's like, no, wait a minute, that doesn't really go there. You just kind of, you made it do that. I don't know.
I don't know. My positive note is Jimmy leaves space for Tony, who is the real star of the album.
Yes.
Once again, Tony is killing it here. And Jimmy's kind of in and out a little bit, but Tony is the one lead bass. I mean, that's the way I would put it. It's lead bass with those cool slides and things he does on the fretless bass. There is a little bit of the In Through the Outdoor sound on Jimmy's guitar to me here.
Okay.
If you listen to it, there's like touches that you're like, yeah, that's In Through the Outdoor Jimmy right there. But once again, there's not much of a solo, and then it just kind of abruptly ends. Like the song's just over. Now, I get it. This is 1985, and you're recording it in 84, and they're saying, hey, we can't do any of those long, drawn-out Led Zeppelin epic songs anymore. This is the 80s, and it's got to have punch, and, 3 to 4 minutes, you're in and you're out. That's it. But I don't know. It's almost like this one wasn't even done and they put it out.
It's interesting that you say punch too, because it seems like Chris Slade, I think he does a great job of fitting in on this record. He's really hitting them hard on this, especially at the end. So he kind of gets to put a little bit of a signature on this thing.
And it's cool that these songs can kind of build. It starts off, a softer song, then it kind of picks up or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, no, Slade's great on this too. The rhythm section is about the best in the world right here. It's just what we're waiting for. This guitar god is
to just break it out.
He just never seems to do it. At least he hasn't yet.
Okay.
Let's see.
Let's keep going.
Let's keep going. The next song, the last song on the first side of the record, is Radioactive. Waka 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 wow. I gotta tell you, I loved this song. Well, is love the right way? I was enamored by it. Okay.
Okay.
I liked it. There's something about it that's very catchy. And so, yeah, I liked it. I liked it back in the day. And it wasn't until later that I just put together in my head, oh, wait, that was Jimmy Page on that song, wasn't it? Because when it came out, I had no understanding of who Led Zeppelin or Jimmy Page were. I never heard anybody talking about it on the radio. Hey, that was the firm who contains Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. I never heard that. I never saw Martha or JJ talking about how this was the firm and it was Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. I just knew this song, Radioactive. Right. And it did well for them. They say it went to number 1 for a week on US mainstream rock. That's a big deal. It got into the top 30 on Billboard, 28. That's not huge, but hey, your lead single charts. That's good news. But it didn't do nearly as well in the UK. I mean, 76 in the UK, which means it was never on top of the pops. Once again, a Zeppelin related band is much bigger in the US than they are in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And, while the B-side was Together on the 7-inch single, the regular single, what was on the 12-inch special edition mix? Well, they had City Sirens live, City Sirens being from the Death Wish soundtrack. And Live in Peace, which was a Paul Rodgers song from his solo album, which they reworked to be on Mean Business in 1986. So, yeah, and the video was pretty basic, right?
Right.
It's just them on stage playing it.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy's got some boots on, but he's got the double neck Red Gibson, and that's what everybody's waiting to see. That's what everybody's so psyched about.
This is a very, very strange song. It doesn't sound like anything that was on the radio at the time. You've got that killer drum intro, just real simple, but real hard.
Oh, man.
And then you got that, it's the weird acoustic, and then Franklin just does his thing. Yeah, he doesn't sound like anybody else. It's so funky. It's so weird, but it sounds really cool. It doesn't sound like anything else on this record.
Yes.
I don't think it sounds like anything else that was even out at the time. And it's just that there's a couple of instruments here. They almost sound like they're fighting against each other. With that that little riff that he's got, it sounds like it's going to fall apart, and then they bring it back together again. This is actually a much better song than I ever gave it credit for, because it's just so weird. It works.
You to know, got to concentrate. Don't be distracted. Turn me on tonight. Come on,
And it's written by Paul on his own.
Yeah, what you'd think too. But this doesn't sound like any Bad Company song I've ever heard.
Well, no, and Bad Company was collaborative. I mean, that was a true supergroup. So other people, it wasn't just Paul writing. He may have done a lot of the lyrics, but it wasn't just Paul writing by himself. The bass and the drums are killer. That intro is huge, very Chris Slade. So you assume it's Paul Rodgers playing the guitar. Live, it would have to be the acoustic bit.
Would be him. Yeah, it'd have to be him.
And then the scratching is Jimmy Page. So you could see, Paul Rodgers wrote this on his own. He can play the guitar. He's playing it by himself. And then Jimmy's got these scratches on it. Waka, 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 radioactive. But then there is the kind of weird toned. It almost sounds like an alien computer wrote it. And I understand you used to be like, that's not what I'm looking for Jimmy Page. It is weird. It's a little odd, but it still works because it's not throughout the whole song.
Right, yeah.
But then Paul is singing Radioactive through like a vocoder or a megaphone, it sounds like. It's normal Paul throughout the chorus, and then it gets to, I'm a radioactive. It sounds like he's doing it through a megaphone or something like that.
Yeah. And you were talking about the video. They're not used to making videos. they look very like, what do I do here? I don't know, just do some stage stuff. Like what, stomp around and pretend I'm playing. Because I mean, you figure you're not really playing this. They're playing the track for you and you're just kind of miming. The two of them look very out of place. Franklin's just doing his thing. He's bebopping around. He's, he's pogo sticking all
Jumping
over the place.
around, yep.
He's fine. It's the two of them that are like, I don't know what to do in a video.
And Rodgers' wardrobe in it was a little odd to me. I'm with you. Again, Tony is the star because that bass is so cool. He's moving around on stage. Like, he's excited. I'm 22 years old playing with legends.
Yeah.
I'm going to hop around and have some fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I really wonder, there's no way that Rodgers wrote that bass part. So when he heard that, was that like the catalyst of, this whole thing can work?
Maybe. Yeah, probably so.
Just do your thing, Tony.
Yeah, and Jimmy's guitar is kind of haunting that. It seems like it might be a carryover from the Jugula sessions because everything was very haunting, like scary haunting in some of those spots. So he's kind of like, all right, well, yeah, I can put a little something on there. I don't know. But it's not even 3 minutes long. It's kind of your typical pop song. Again, doesn't have really a solo in it, right?
No, other than that weird kind of trilling that he's doing. No, that's it.
And it's kind of got the double entendre. Like I'm active on the radio, but also I could be radioactive. Like, don't stand too close. You might catch it. I guess live Slade would do like a drum solo.
And then it would go into that,
And then it would go into it. But I got a question kind of outside because they're talking about Page used his brown Fender Telecaster on tour with this song. He wouldn't use the double neck on this song.
Okay.
That was just kind of for the video. But I'm not going to ask about that. I want to know, what is that guitar? Because I've seen it over the years. That's black and white that he uses. That's not kind of a standard Gibson shape.
Interesting.
I don't know. I figured you might know what that was.
Not off the top of my head, but now let me see if I can find that.
Because he played it on that tour. I feel like he played it at either Atlantic Records or one like Nebworth or one of those things. So that was obviously a guitar that was very important to him. But I don't know what kind of guitar that is.
Okay, this appears to be a 1963, I don't even know what this is, Delatronic something 302.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very strange looking. It's got that, it's a DC2 is the name of this thing. And it's a little bit Les Paul looking. It's got that really weird headstock. It's small. I don't know what the significance is of it, but this was definitely a favorite of his.
Yeah, obviously, and I never quite really knew what it was. I just figured you as the equipment guy would know.
Yeah, I don't see anybody else using this thing, so I guess maybe this was a kind of a one-off deal that he loved. Mm-hmm. It's definitely interesting looking, and it's always weird to me to see him playing not the double neck and not a Les Paul.
Exactly.
Like if it's the Fender or something else, I'm like, what's going on here?
I know. But I mean, look, I like it. It got him on the radio. It got him on MTV. It's a big reason why the album went gold in America. But that's kind of it as far as really catchy songs, It did go gold in Canada too. And Kerrang!, when our buddy Mick Wall was there, put it as number 20 on the albums of 1985. However, it did not sell well in the UK at all. And they didn't do a ton of touring there. And I think that without MTV, they just didn't. And the fact that, it went to 75 or 76, whatever it was, didn't get on Top of the Pops. No one was that interested, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, this was definitely not what was popular on the radio, especially in England at the time. And I don't know, it kind of seems like everybody always kind of had a problem with Jimmy Page over there. You're like, oh, what do you think? You're too good for us. You make songs for America or American audiences. So, yeah. Sorry.
And after 5 years or whatever, this is what you bring us.
Hi, this is Jim McCarthy of the Yardbirds, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London.
But that's side one.
Yeah.
Moved to side two. And they inexplicably start side two with You've Lost That Love and Feeling, a cover by the Righteous Brothers.
Okay.
Of course, by
Yes.
Phil Spector, Barry Mann, and Cynthia Weil. I'll let you start. That's fine.
Well, so I don't even know where to start on this one because you say the Righteous Brothers, as in more than one person, and then it was covered by Hall and Oates in 1980, also more than one person. Now you're going to have Paul Rodgers sing this basically by himself. There's a little bit of a choir in the back. It's very strange. This is a song that was written for a two-part harmony, and you don't have it here. Also, why did you? It doesn't fit on the record either. Like this, what? Why would you do this?
Aha. Aha.
Franklin is doing some cool stuff on the bass, and he does. There was a live clip of this, and he's just down there, just doing all the rhythm parts there, sliding all over the place. Roger's voice is fantastic, but it's weird. It doesn't fit, and you need that extra person singing with you. And again, why did you pick this? You could have covered any song. Why did you pick this one?
We had love, a love you don't find every day. So darling, 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 don't take our love away. Bring back that love and feeling. Oh, that love and feeling.
Yeah, so the Hall & Oates version, which I heard the other day randomly as we were kind of getting ready for this. I'm like, what are the odds of that? I haven't heard that in forever. It went to 12 on Billboard, 4 on Airplay. Pretty big hit for them. It went nowhere for the firm, as you might expect. I just have one note on here.
What's that?
4 words. Did we need this?
I think
It'd
the
be
answer
one
is
thing
no.
if no one had touched it since
Right.
the
Yeah.
Righteous Brothers did it in the mid 60s. But a bunch of people covered it. Dionne Warwick covered it, and like you said, Hall & Oates just a few years before had
Right.
done it. And I heard it the other day on the radio. I'm like, this is good. I mean,
Yeah.
Daryl Hall and John Oates could sing together. That's a different animal. I understand that Jimmy wasn't writing that well and that much, and we're trying to get him back into shape. This is a very odd choice to me. Very, very odd, and it just doesn't fit. And it's 4.5 minutes long. The first one was probably 2.5 minutes. I do not get it. I just don't. Now, the first one was longer. Okay, yeah, 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Fine. But still, who needs this? Nobody. And you start off the second side with it. Ugh. And they had to play it. They had to sing it at night because they don't have any other songs,
Well, yeah, that and Rogers is like, I'm going to showcase the golden pipes right now, so everybody just sit back and get ready to be amazed.
Yeah, I don't get it, but fine. They play. I mean, it's great when you don't have a big catalog to do covers that people know so they can sing along and get excited about it. But this doesn't make sense to me. Like you said, it's for a singing group. They're not a singing group. They're a guitar group with a great singer.
Right. It's a slow song too. It's like, why I don't want to sit. I want high energy. I don't want this.
I know. And so to start off the second side on kind of a downer with something but isn't as good as the first one, not even close. Disappointing. And we're going to stop there.
Let's move on from there. Yes, please.
To the next track, Money Can't Buy. Tony's still the star of the show.
Okay.
The guitar is good, but Tony is still the star of the show, and he stands out really well on this.
Yeah, this one sounds like a Bad Company song to me also.
Well, again, Rodgers wrote it without any help.
Right. And so I'm like, well, this is actually a pretty cool Bad Company song. I don't think we get enough Jimmy Page in this. We get a lot of Tony Franklin, which, like you said, he carries this track, and it's a little bit of a darker theme. Yeah, I don't know. It's okay.
That's the point. It's just okay. Yeah. There's some nice guitar on it, but it doesn't stand out. It's like, ooh, yeah. Have you heard "Money Can't Buy" by The Firm? It's it's fine, and it's got the kind of universal thing. Once was a poor boy living hand to mouth. Didn't have much of anything. Didn't know till I found out that money can't buy the love that I used to know. I could buy you diamonds and pearls from the Orient, live in a penthouse suite. I don't know nobody a cent, but money can't buy that love I used to know. you start to look at this, there's only 9 songs on the album. Page only co-wrote 5 of them. 3 were Paul Rodgers solo rights. 1 is a cover, an ill-advised cover. So, I mean, it's kind of universal, but the lyrics are super simple.
Yeah.
And yes, Paul can sing, yes. And I like what Chris Slade's doing. It's just, what is Jimmy doing? It's okay. It's fine. He's being a backup player. I understand it's Paul's song and you didn't write on it, but
you could have come in there and given me something, put your touch on this deal.
Yeah,
your
exactly.
signature on this song. And it's just, I think that's the theme of this whole record is you're waiting for him to just break out and just, take the spotlight, and it really never happens.
I live in a penthouse suite and I don't know nobody else. Money can buy the love that I used to know. Money can't buy.
Where's Jimmy Page?
Yeah.
You're selling this as a Jimmy Page is here. You're selling the tour. Certainly you're going to see Jimmy Page play the guitar. And where is he? Where's Jimmy Page? Well, the fact of the matter is he hadn't been working much.
Yeah.
He hadn't been super creative. I know he made the Death Wish soundtrack. I knew he did the Jugula album. And he did whatever he had to do to finish Coda. But he's just cashing checks, basically, from Led Zeppelin still, and he doesn't have to work, so he really wasn't. And it's cool that he wanted to hang out with Paul, because he always kind of wanted to be in a band with Paul, because who wouldn't with that voice? But, yeah.
And the other thing maybe to think about, too, is back in the Zeppelin days, you had the other guys to lean on. Right? Like, maybe you come in with a little bit of something and they add to it, and you had that recipe, and now it's different. And maybe you're not getting the same thing from these guys. Maybe you're a little rustier than you thought. Maybe this is all more than you thought it was going to be. Yeah, it's just, I'm just waiting for something that never happens on this record.
Basically, yeah, that's a good way to put it. You're waiting for something that never happens. You're waiting for Jimmy Page, and it never happens. It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Okay, now Satisfaction Guaranteed is the 3rd single off the album, and they did make a video for it. And you see in that 5 for 5 thing how the director kind of justified how he wanted to make this video, in that it's kind of a blues-based band, in that Free and Bad Company and Zeppelin are all kind of blues-based bands. So they set it at like the Louisiana Bayou, at like a blues joint, although it's a little higher end once you're inside there. And it's called Les's Place. Why is it called Les's Place, Jackson?
Well, because unfortunately they've got him working behind the bar. It's old man. Let him
They got Les Paul working behind the bar. He's the special guest star.
Let him enjoy his golden years. But the interesting part is you've got both Page and Paul Rodgers playing Les Pauls.
That's
in
right.
this video, because we're going to tribute the guy who basically invented the concept of the electric guitar. So thank you so much, Mr. Les Paul, for making that and having the iconic model named after him.
Yeah, no. Great to see Les. Great to see a few hot chicks
Correct.
in it,
Sweaty hot chick.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. You make them sweaty because you ever been to Louisiana? It's about the hottest place in the world. Yeah, it's moody. It's not quite mid-tempo. It's slow, is the way I would put it. But it's still brilliant in my eyes. It's still got some greatness to it.
Okay.
Now, Jimmy's wearing a Hawaiian shirt with like a white scarf kind of thing. I don't know if I approve of that. And when they're interviewing them both, basically right before they shoot the video, Jimmy's talking about how doesn't want to be an instant actor. He's not sure how to do it. But he's like, in this one, I can get into it because the set is really nice. They made the set really cool. It's like, it's so sleazy. I could live in there.
Yeah.
Sitting there just smoking his cigarettes. But again, he kind of brings out the gimmicks in the video, right? Because he starts off, there's not a lot of guitar in it at first. Roger's kind of handling the little bit of guitar, and Jimmy's got the bow. Oh,
Right.
dude, Jimmy's got the bow. Oh, I'm losing my mind. But he's not doing a whole lot with it. He's just, adding a little texture,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And kind of over the top, like, look what I'm doing here. You kind of have that slow intro. But then, I mean, again, Franklin comes in and that bass part makes this whole song.
It's so good. I know.
Yeah.
It's so good. This is the Tony Franklin album, not the Jimmy Page album. I'm telling you.
Tell me, baby, do you need my love? Tell me, baby, are you thinking of me? Tell me, baby, what it is you need. What kind of satisfaction guarantee?
And then, of course, the hot chick walks up to Jimmy, hands him the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of using, like a little slide on his finger, he just takes the bottle and kind of runs it. It looks cool. He's not playing it. Okay.
No,
It's
does not
obvious
match up.
it's just for the video. And Slade's just back there, like in his shades, just popping it, going so slow. It must be so hard for him to play that slow. On time, you bet. Powerful, keeping the song tight. It is. But he's got to be bored. He's got to be bored playing this track, even though it's a really good song. I think it's a good song.
And it's interesting too, because for a single, it's very slow. Mm-hmm. I kind of think this is better to me than Radioactive. Like the feel of it. I do like the slide part. I don't like the goofy gimmicks that he's trying to force on you. But again, they don't know what they're doing. Come on. I don't, I'm not a video guy. I'm not a 20-year-old model who's up here just, vamping for the camera. I'll give you something. Yeah. I don't know what was going on with the scarf. I don't know what was going on with what Paul Rodgers was wearing either. That just look out of place.
Yeah. I don't know. It went to number 73. That's as high as it got, but it is a good song. Mm-hmm. The Radioactive it's different. Like you say, it doesn't sound like anything else. That scratching is cool. The is odd.
Yeah.
To kind of set it apart. But this is a good song. It's just a little slow, but I don't know, it's cool. It's the best song on the album, I think.
I would agree. I would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they put a little money into the video because it gives it, I don't know, it just gives it a little more weight to it. Mm-hmm. It was really cool to see Les Paul. I know that Jimmy Page obviously he played Les Paul's, but I think he is a huge fan of the man himself and how he played and advanced the science of guitar playing. So it's cool that he pays homage to him. But again, I think you're waiting for something else from Page. Like the slide is cool, but I want that like times 100.
I know, but the song's so slow. I mean, look, someone else could have had a hit with it. Does Rodgers' face look a little bloated to you in this? I mean, I guess I'm just so used to seeing him now when he's in such sick shape, because he's married to like a fitness model and he's just, taking really good care of himself. But his face looks a little doughy.
It could be, that was back in the 80s. You don't know what was happening there as far as diet or
lifestyle.
Extracurricular. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he's got to be. I think he's over 80 now. He looks, for an 80-year-old man,
he looks great.
He's in fantastic shape and can still belt them out.
I know. And when I saw him play on the Stars Align tour with Jeff Beck, I want to say that was 2017 or so. He looked amazing. I'm like, oh my God, because I know how old he is. I'm like, God, he's in great shape. He's in like a tank top and he's like, I'm like, damn, he looks good. And the ladies next to me, oh my God, he's so hot. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to go that far, but I mean, I know how old he is and I know what a lead singer can look like and he looks pretty good. So happy for him. But now this is a great song, I think, and can kind of lead to what would come next as far as the next album, not the next song, but the next album. Let's get into the last song, the epic Midnight Moonlight, which is over 9 minutes long.
Another interesting choice. You've kept it. Let's see if I can find.
You're from 3 to 5 minutes on every song.
Correct. And so now we're going to give you the big one at the end here. I just wanted to listen to the record all the way through without kind of doing anything else at the beginning. And when I heard this, I'm like, this is the most Led Zeppelin-y track on the record.
Right.
And then you go and you find out the backstory to how this came to life.
Which is?
That this was an unused track from the Physical Graffiti days, I think called Swan Song was the original working title.
That's right.
And so, yes, when I go back, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what this sounds like.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's the epic, right? This could be the Achilles' last stand of the album, right? When they would play this live, Jimmy would sit down.
Okay, it's going to be a while, so you might want to be comfortable.
Let him sit down. He's playing the black and white.
Yeah.
And he's playing what was, acoustic. And my note, it's very reminiscent of Led Zeppelin. He does a verse and a chorus, and then kind of changes into this haunting thing. It's different live than it is on the album, obviously. Mm-hmm. Live, it's an excuse for Jimmy to sit there and noodle and solo. And some of it's good, and some of it's like, what the heck is he doing? And then when he decides to stand up, that's when the song, changes and goes into this big chorus and all that kind of thing. It was a mess to me live. I was watching it with the Wolf Cub. I'm like, you can help me get ready for my show. Because I wanted to see what it looked like live, just because if it's 9 minutes, there must be something about it that made them want to do this. And it's a little longer. It's closer to 10 or 11 minutes. Oof. Live. Like, okay, there's a reason they wanted to stretch this out. It must be something cool live. And it's like, yeah, Jimmy's sitting there sweating. Wolf Cub's like, why is he sweating? He's just sitting there. And I didn't want to get into the whole, like, he's not taking very good care of himself at this point conversation. I'm just like, look, those lights are hot. Which is true. But yeah, he's just like sitting there sweating, trying to play the guitar like he did 10 years before.
Okay, so we can take a quick segue here, because you said 10 years before, and then about 10 years after this, as we talked on the unleaded No Quarter, to see where he came, or where he got to 10 years after this. He's a different person on that.
Yeah.
And on that record and on those live clips. So he gets himself back together. Luckily, we could see him not at the height, but I mean, he was in really good shape in '94. So looking at this, really glad that he pulled himself out of the spiral he was in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can see that he was maybe off of heroin at this point, but there was some lingering damage there.
Mm-hmm. That just doesn't flush out of your system in 24 hours. You're like, okay, back to it.
Yeah.
Plus, you got to figure being on the road too is we had things that we did on the road that helped take the time up that maybe aren't there anymore. Yeah, this is rough.
It's one thing when you're 25. Now you're, approaching 40 and your body's older than that thanks to the damage that you did. Yeah, I don't know. It's a mess live. It has better structure on the record, but it's still like 9 minutes of what?
Yeah.
Not 9 minutes of what? There's good singing by Paul or whatever. Midnight, moonlight lady. Okay, that bit's fine.
Flows. Yeah.
But where's the rest of it?
Right.
I don't know. Look, you sit down, you do the acoustic part. That sounds cool. Then you do the big chords for the chorus. Yeah. Then there's this noodling bit where it could have been this killer new Jimmy Page solo thing, but it's really just, what do I want to do tonight? All right, well, I'll do some of this. I'll do some of that. Okay, I think I'm ready to stand up. Everybody join in with me now. Yeah, I don't know. It was just, if you see it as a vehicle to get Page back in shape so he could be Jimmy Page again, then it's fine. But if you're looking at it like, is this breaking new ground? Is this now a new viable thing on its own? I'm not so sure that it was. And of course, it proved to not be.
So going back to the beginning again, did you rewrite history saying, oh, this was only supposed to be 2 records? If you'd have made 2 records that knocked it out of the park,
right,
several million sellers, would you still be doing it? Or would you say, no, we only said 2 records. I'm sorry. Right. We're going away now.
Well, exactly. I think if they had 2 triple platinum records,
right, you'd still be hearing from
things would have been today. Different.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. They needed to get Jimmy back in shape, get him working. And obviously when you work with people, it takes time to grow as a band. Just because you're a supergroup and everybody's awesome at what they do, there's still a thing called feel and playing together and then seeing what comes out, what creativity comes out from playing songs, even if they're familiar, playing songs together.
Yeah.
And Jimmy said something about Mean Business, the second album, which would come out the next year. So that turns 40 next year. He said, every single song on the album is very strong, and I usually don't say that. Now, part of that's just trying to sell the record, because the first one didn't sell off the charts anyway.
And what are you going to say?
Yeah.
Some of these songs suck, but
some songs are pretty weak, but we've got some good ones in there. I definitely see progress on the second album. I do think Mean Business is better. It's a step forward.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's going in the right direction. But
okay,
maybe there was just not enough success. And if people are starting to whisper to Jimmy about Zeppelin, and then Geffen's like, hey, you can make a solo album with us. I don't know. But it's probably Jimmy needed this to get back on track. And Paul, the latter days, is like, that's what it was for, to get Jimmy back into shape and back doing his thing again. I'm like, again, that's revisionist history. If you had huge hits, it might not have been the case.
Right.
But they did 2 arena tours on the strength of these albums. No, it wasn't on the strength of these albums. It was on the strength of Jimmy Page.
Legend. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Although it's interesting you say that about the second record, because I haven't done a ton of research on it, but what I've found is that the standout track on Mean Business is Dreaming, written by Tony Franklin. So I wonder, maybe if you let him do a little more of the heavy lifting on this record, things might have been different. You never know.
All right, well, I'll have to break with you on that, because the standout track is All the King's Horses on Mean Business.
All right.
But it also had Fortune Hunter, which is pretty good. They reworked Live in Peace and made a pretty cool video about it. Tear down the walls.
Are you trying to make a case for a Mean Business show?
I'm just saying that the second album's better.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
It's interesting you say that too, because in the I don't remember what video it was, but the one that they were showcasing, you've got now Page in that purple suit. Mm-hmm. And he looks way cooler than the dopey Hawaiian shirt from the first one, and whatever he was wearing in the Radioactive video, boots or something. I don't know. Okay, maybe we do take a peek at that next year.
Maybe we do. And Tony, instead of having his hair spiked up real high, he has all these braids.
The dreads or whatever that was.
No, they're braids. They're not dreads. They're braided, and they could play longer too, right? They didn't just have to do these 17 songs. They play more than 20 songs. Again, they're playing amphitheaters, and they're playing the Forum. They're playing the Summit. They're playing Reunion Arena. They're playing all those great old arenas that everybody used to play. So to wrap it up, I'd have to say that given who was on it, and given the thirst that we had for new Page Zeppelin kind of music, it's a little weak. I think the rhythm section is amazing. I think Tony Franklin deserves a ton of credit for this album that he doesn't get just because his name's not Jimmy Page or Paul Rodgers. I think if they had really given it a chance, this is a good starting point, bringing Jimmy back to life. But as a standalone, it's got 2 good songs on it. It's got a couple okay songs on it, and the rest is forgettable. As somebody who wants to like it, that's where I come out.
And I think that's my problem too. Is I really wanted to find that track where it was like, this is it. This is this is what we were waiting for. This is what drives it home. This is that album cut that I'm going to fall in love with. It just never happened. But if this is what kept Page from coming totally off the rails and either passing away or you'd never heard from him again, it did its job. Thank you.
And thank you, Jackson, because you've done your job. And that's all we need on this gold-selling record. So it's good to be able to talk about Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers, Tony Franklin and Chris Slade and the Firm. Jackson and I have been talking about this one for a while. Should we do it? Should we do it? Because it's not a huge record, but because it has Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers, it is significant. We've had Chris Slade on the show talking about his time in the Firm, and in a way it was our real introduction to Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers as 11 and 12-year-olds when we heard Radioactive on the radio and saw it on MTV, not knowing, of course, who they really were. It's an interesting one. I know it wasn't super popular, only went gold in America, didn't have huge hits, Radioactive being the biggest. But I still think it was worth doing. Showcasing the talent of the Fretless Monster, Tony Franklin, is worth it. He is fantastic on this record. And Chris Slade is steady as ever. I just feel like it's disappointing from the standpoint like we were waiting for Jimmy Page, right? And on In Through the Outdoor, he was a little bit absent. And so then Coda comes out. Yeah, it's got some cool stuff on it, but it didn't really have any rhyme or reason to it. It had a bunch of old stuff kind of put together just for the purpose of satisfying their record contract. No one cared about Death Wish. No one heard what happened to Jugula. So everyone is really waiting to hear from Jimmy Page again. And I just feel from that standpoint, it was a letdown. There's some good songs on there. There's some songs that aren't great. If it's for the purpose of rejuvenating Jimmy Page, getting him working, getting him going in the right direction again, then yeah, it's a win for everybody. A chance to showcase what might have been the best rhythm section on the planet. Awesome. Glad they did it. But as far as just a great album you want to sit and listen to, I don't think it really hits that height. Now, the next album, Mean Business, is much better in my opinion, and maybe we'll review that in the future. You'll have to stay tuned to see. Overall, I'd say it's a disappointment given the fact that we were really hoping for something special out of Page. We thought Paul Rodgers with Page would be this amazing combination, and it was just kind of, yeah, okay, fine. But we want to know, folks, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Do we miss the point? Do we leave out your favorite part? You have to let us know. Email us. It's uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. You let us know the bands, the albums, the tours, the concerts, the DVDs, the rock properties you want to hear us talk about here on the show. And we need you to download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Download's the lifeblood of growing the show. It helps us grow the show. It helps us find more guests, as does writing a positive review. You go out and give us a 5-star review. Anywhere you get your podcast, it doesn't matter. It helps us find more rock and rollers like you. And if you send it to us, we may just read it on an episode. Thanks as always to Pantheon Podcast for making us part of the family. And thanks to our sponsor, rarevinyl.com, where you use the code UGLY, you can save 10% off one entire order. They have a little Firm stuff. They have a lot of Zeppelin stuff, a lot of Bad Company stuff, all sorts of Jimmy Page stuff. Go in and find something you love. Use the code UGLY. Save yourself 10%. That's it for now. But I can tell you there will be more Jimmy Page related material coming this year. Maybe sooner than you think. So stay tuned. And to all you rockers all around the world, be cool and keep doing what you do to keep rock alive.